Hello, today I'm returning to Tekken with a look at the popular secondary character and resident pugilist, Steve Fox. Now, Steve is one of these next generation characters that, with the foundation of Tekken now being well established, with a set of legacy characters to build on, he was part of the next phase of storyline that took place, and was introduced in Tekken 4 as one of its marquee fighters, along with Marduk, and to a lesser extent Christie, also swelling the ranks with their unique personalities and fighting styles. And as with many new entrants, Steve, Marduk and Christie represent certain countries and fighting styles entering the fold for the first time and helping boast the improvements of handling, gameplay and graphics as they do so. And interestingly, both Marduk and Christie for their part bring Brazilian martial arts to the table, with Christie echoing Eddie Gordo's capoeira style, being the granddaughter of Eddie's tutor, and Marduk, for his part, being billed initially as a Vala judo practitioner, which in itself isn't really a martial art. It's just a Portuguese term for anything goes, and was a Brazilian term for MMA back in the day. But within this, we can see Marduk has a lot of Brazilian jiu-jitsu and sambo sort of manoeuvres that plant him firmly in that striker-grappler arena of what we call MMA, and he's actually quite an interesting character to play through as. But turning now and focusing on Steve Fox among the newcomers, he's the one that I found the most interesting, and that's not just because he's British, and not even that he's a boxer, which is without question my personal favourite sport, but more so the way they applied the sport of boxing to Steve's gameplay and attempted to retain a faithfulness to the rules, the manoeuvres and the drills that are found in boxing. Because when we first saw the characters released for this game, I had no idea. I could struggle to conceive how they would make a boxer work in a game that's success derives in no small part to this intuitive, unique handling of the controls, where each limb is prescribed, a button on the PlayStation or whatever the controller might be, the arcade pad. And so to remove the kicks and retain this balance of gameplay and fairness, I was really interested to see how they would do that. And I think by incorporating the bobbing and weaving and this lateral movement for his kick button configuration, that really played well to his character. It translated the sport of boxing very well into the Tekken gameplay, and I think it also capitalised on Tekken 4's advances in developing a sense of depth and Z-axis manoeuvres and sidestepping in its stages and scenarios. So I think they did well with Steve in terms of gameplay, and they continue to evolve his character and moveset in later games with these catch and counters and his various parries and so on. So very nuanced gameplay and pleasantly very faithful to a large degree to the sport of boxing, I think. And since we haven't had a boxing game released in well over a decade now, I tend to just play as Steve whenever I'm longing for the sport. So shifting into story, as I say, Steve has sprung, quite literally in this case, from the foundations of established characters, and in particular Nina Williams, and among many of Tekken's expanding secondary stories that operate beneath the core story of the Mishima arc, this was one of the larger curveballs that we saw emerge out of the fallout of Tekken 3. And while many might have expected the Nina Williams-Anna Williams feud to just continue for eternity, Steve was an unexpected component, and the Tekken writers embellished this ongoing saga with the inclusion of a biological son for Nina. Now, as with many Tekken characters who have been caused anguish or pain or just had adverse, weird, horrible things happen to them, Steve's existence roots back to Heihachi Mishima. And in this case, he had scientists extract and fertilise Nina's eggs while she was in cryogenic sleep prior to the events of Tekken 3. And this was in order to explore the properties of the devil gene and experiment in his attempts to create kind of superhuman creatures that could replicate that. And Steve, for his part, was smuggled out of this experimentation and smuggled away from the lab by what turned out to be Leo's mother, who was later canonised, and of course Leo was introduced to the series. And he subsequently wound up in England, where he grew to become a boxing champion and developed a very strong Cockney accent. So again, as with other Tekken characters I've discussed and secondary characters I've discussed, Heihachi has profoundly affected the arc of both Nina and Steve's stories, and a lot of his subsequent plotline does hinge around trying to discover his murky origins and the circumstances of his birth. And to date, at the end of Tekken 7, we're going to see this open up, I expect, in Tekken 8, because he does confront Nina and attempt to get answers there. So it'll be interesting to see what revelations come from subsequent instalments of the series. Further to Steve's core arc, he's quite a positive and positioned as quite a protagonistic character within the games. Despite being quite a cocky Cockney lad, he definitely aligns more to good-natured characters such as Lei Wulong, Law, and so on, more so than he does bad. And one thing I will note, which I have mixed feelings about if they do try and go somewhere with this, but he does seem to interact with Paul Phoenix and Law in certain cutscenes, and they've started training together. And as much as I like Paul and Law's bromance and how they kind of train together and develop their fighting styles together, I think introducing this canonical friendship with Steve, I do wonder if they're going to attempt to embellish Steve's fighting style moving forward, giving him more of a mixed martial arts or grappling or kick maneuvers to complement his boxing because of this subplot of him training with these guys. And I suppose on the one hand, there's only so far you can really take a moveset that relies purely on boxing, in the Tekken series maybe. But as a boxing fan and a boxing purist, I do worry it would diminish the attributes and the intrigue and the playstyle of Steve Fox. So yeah, perhaps I'm reading too much into it, but I do wonder if they'll attempt that. Turning to aesthetics, Steve does bear resemblance to Nina Williams with his stark blonde hair and his pale complexion, and his costumes range from the primary and probably quite expected attire of a pro boxer, with the shorts and the gloves bearing the colourways of the British Union flag, and his secondary outfit often comprises some quite garish patterned shirts, which you certainly might expect from an Englishman abroad. But overall, good design, I think. Steve is very intriguing and he stands out quite well, particularly the Player 1 outfits, which, as I say, are faithful to what you'd expect to see from a pro boxer. So that about wraps it up. A brief overview on Steve. Very interesting character, very cool gameplay, and a solid contribution to the Tekken games. If you got this far, thanks for listening, and I hope you enjoyed it. And if so, you may enjoy the numerous other Tekken character episodes that feature on the channel. So feel free to drop a comment below and let me know your thoughts on Steve.